What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we're very privileged to have Arjun Ohri, the CEO of ShopMessage. ShopMessage helps brands increase sales and loyalty by engaging customers with two-way dialogue over Facebook Messenger at meaningful points in the customer journey. Previously to ShopMessage, Arjun had founded FanRock and has worked at Zynga and Microsoft. So at that, Arjun, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chad. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we've been talking for quite some time and we've met up at some conferences, and it's always nice to get your perspective on the space. Before we get into sort of the conversational specific questions, I always like to ask a unique question based upon our guest's background. So I was sort of seeing in your background when you're in college, it seems to me that you're very passionate about music. So I was curious, like, how does like sort of music, I was curious if like music like influenced the way that, whether it was the way that you conducted business or you found some parallels between the two, or it was just like a really good outlet for you, as you were sort of running these startups. Just curious about that.
Oh, wow. Thanks for noticing that. Music has been a really important part of my life since even growing up. I studied music in college. As long as I can remember, I've always been a part of some sort of a band or a singing group or playing instruments with friends, formally or informally. And it was really all of the above. In terms of work, for a long time, I thought I'd be working in music, maybe somewhere in the industry. There was a time when I worked at Microsoft on the Zune, which, for a lot of reasons that product failed, but for other reasons, it was ahead of its time in how it thought about making music social. And a lot of the things that, we had pioneered back then, we've seen be really successful in Spotify now. So there was a time when I worked in it briefly, but I realized that I don't need to work in it to really enjoy it. And nowadays, it's just a phenomenal creative outlet. Funny enough, a lot of my best friends and even my best professional contacts I've met actually through music. And it's a great way to get to know people. And I'm all about finding other contexts to meet and get to know people.
Absolutely. No, I think that's, it's always really encouraging and exciting to hear that, especially from startup founders. I think it's important, and you probably echo the same opinion, to make sure you have like an outlet that's not just the business. And I'd actually previously interviewed the founder of Janus, and I think they're connecting like Dialogflow with ManyChat, and his background was in music too. So he sort of shared some similar sentiments to you on like how the community, and he had met some of his co-founders in that space. So I think it's like really interesting to always sort of hear that.
I think that, music's a creative process, and a lot of what we do as entrepreneurs or building companies or even building experiences in chat is creative. And one thing I find is that like creativity can sometimes feel like a grind if you're only going down one vector, like only writing code or only trying to think about company building. And sometimes just like exercising creativity in a completely different way, like music or something artistic, just kind of gets your creative juices flowing. And also another thing I like is, no matter how good of a day good or bad of a day you can have in running a company, which obviously can feel brutal at times, having something else that you're also working towards and trying to better yourself in, ideally something that's creative or physical, just kind of makes all the days feel a lot better. So I hope to continue to be doing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. You sound exactly like my co-founder. He says the same thing. Like he'll go home and like jam on his guitar and like, start practicing a new song, after the day of startup work. So I really love that. So sort of transitioning a little bit into sort of the e-commerce side of things. And, essentially that's what we're going to be talking about today, how Facebook Messenger and conversational interfaces, really merges and really can augment the e-commerce side of things. So, Arjun, your background, for the last several years, from Zynga to FanRock and then finally to ShopMessage has really been surrounded and focused in on this e-commerce component. And not only e-commerce, but also how the Facebook platform really helped to enable and augment some of those e-commerce activities. So if you don't mind sort of taking the listeners through, that sort of succession And that evolution that you've sort of seen the Facebook platform take, as well as e-commerce, I think that would sort of provide, some degree of context to how we sort of end up at ShopMessage.
No problem. So Facebook's obviously very important to me. I remember Facebook really coming out while I was in college. My co-founder was one of the first 100 people to even have a Facebook account. And I find it to be such an inspiring and fascinating company, although it also has its ups and downs. And really the last 10 years of my career have been focused on building businesses on top of or kind of ancillary to Facebook. So when I think of Facebook, the broader mission is really being a social utility for the world, really trying to connect the world. And I've seen it go through various phases. So when the platform first came out, it felt like what Facebook wanted to offer was just ways to provide context around social interactions. And this already happens in the real world. When friends get together, they get together to watch a sports game or play a game or play or listen to music or talk about news or politics. So this already happens in the real world, and Facebook, the company, used their platform to really provide more of this context. And starting out at Zynga back in 2009, there was this, that was the first time I got a taste of what it meant to build on top of the Facebook platform. It was a blessing in that you can reach millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, very quickly, very rapidly on a platform that's really built around connecting people and sharing. So that allowed some of the games and apps we've built at Zynga, things like Words with Friends or Farmville, it enabled them to just go viral from just making a good experience that people wanted to share with their friends, and really showed the power of building a business on top of Facebook. And it also showed the other side of it, which is Facebook's mission is not necessarily to make sure companies like Zynga or the companies in its ecosystem can be successful. They're very important, but ultimately Facebook needs to think about the user. And much though the platform was designed around requests and items that go in the newsfeed, they didn't want everyone's Facebook newsfeed to be just full of requests from Farmville or other games. So Facebook would oftentimes make some changes where at every phase of my career has really change it either for the better or worse. So, just by a flip of the switch, that'll make the reach or retention or engagement significantly change. So, over the past 10 years, definitely now I go into it with my eyes wide open and realize that trying to understand Facebook's broader goals and making sure we put the user first is the most important thing, while also just being aware of when Facebook can make a change so that we understand what the platform risk is. So Facebook really started off with their platform of just giving context to users. So that enabled games, that enabled apps like Spotify to grow, it enabled sharing of news to happen, and companies like BuzzFeed to grow like crazy. And then the next realm, or the next phase, was I saw Facebook really double down into commerce and make really turn your news feed into somewhat of a product feed. And you already see this happening on Instagram quite a bit. A large percentage of users will use Instagram and they'll use it as a shopping channel, as a way to discover new products. So it was very natural for Facebook to develop a whole e-commerce ads capability on its platform. And this was around 6 years ago. My co-founder Andrew and we had left Zynga and seen this opportunity for e-commerce, and we realized that now brands can reach millions of people on Facebook in a very cost-effective way, where people actually hang out. And you can take a brand and start from nothing and really grow it to be pretty large and have an advantage over the existing incumbents that just didn't know how Facebook operated. So, we actually started our own e-commerce business. We would design jewelry and apparel and mugs, and we use a combination of our organic shares on Facebook, but actually mostly ads automation to really reach specific audiences from all over the world. So you could have a t-shirt that says, this nurse loves her corgi, which sounds ridiculous. But if you're a nurse who has a corgi and you see the first item in your newsfeed on Facebook or Instagram as being a shirt that speaks to who you are, then you're going to go and buy that and get it shipped to your house. And so we put together a bunch of on-demand supply chains with Facebook's ad channels to really provide this seemingly magical experience to customers, personalizing products for them. And then that's continued to be massive. You're seeing a lot of brands that nowadays they didn't exist 5-10 years ago, but now are doing hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly billions of dollars in sales. And they've really been enabled by social media, namely Facebook and Instagram. And what we've been seeing recently, especially in the last 6 months to a year, is Facebook realizing that, if their broader mission is to connect the world, they're noticing that the way people are actually connecting is through one-on-one messages, small group messages, and ephemeral messages like stories. And a lot of engagement is moving away from one-to-many communication, like posting on your Facebook newsfeed or on Instagram, but really sharing with the more intimate group and where there's higher engagement. And so you can see Facebook really moving in that direction. And even Mark Zuckerberg's post from earlier this year talks about how the future of Facebook could look a little bit more like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger than what it looks like today, which is mostly newsfeed based. And there's a model for this too. I mean, if you look at Asia, if you look at WeChat and Line, you see actually this behavior is already happening. And it's not just people talking to their friends and family, it's also they're talking to businesses, both like their local businesses who they meet with face to face, and also large corporations. So you can see definitely over the next 5 to 10 years that it's going to be expected that if you have a business, then you have a messaging or chat presence in the same way that nowadays it's assumed that if you have a business, you have a phone number or you have a website or that people can find you on Google. So the next frontier for Facebook is really going to be doubling down even further on messaging. And that's really the trend that we had seen. And, running an e-commerce company, we saw that, okay, newsfeed ads are getting more and more saturated, and yet the way people are actually engaging with each other is completely different. They're not posting on the newsfeed anymore. So we saw this opportunity to really engage our shoppers for our own store through Messenger. And so really ShopMessage, what's now a company, started off as just a feature we built for our own store.
And I think oftentimes, I think that root of innovation is sometimes the most valuable, right? When you're building something for yourself or your own use because you really were, sort of motivated and inspired by the technology or the capabilities of it, and today, I think you had mentioned that ShopMessage has helped sort of win back over $100 million of lost revenue just from the abandoned cart use case. So I think it's just phenomenal, but at the same time, to your point, it seems to me that e-commerce has always been about how do we sort of connect, the expressed intent by consumers with the brands so the brands can actually actualize on that and sort of connect those two pieces. And it's interesting to sort of see the behavior shifts and the platform sort of expand and contract to those specific needs, right? I think if we think back to search engines and what people have begun to progressively see over the last several years is the number of keywords or the average number of keywords increased from around like 2.6 to much longer today to almost being conversational. And then similarly with the platforms like Facebook, it's like we're getting better targeting, better tools, better capabilities to get closer as a brand to our customers that are already conversing and talking with their friends and family on there all the time. So it's interesting to see this trend because it's almost like there is this common thread, right? It's not like anything is drastically changing from sort of a consumer to brand perspective, but I think, things are becoming more efficient and channels are emerging that are making it more accessible. So to that point, what is like the specific market opportunity that ShopMessage is filling, right? So you guys saw this as a major opportunity, and now ShopMessage is sort of expanding into this suite of tools for conversational commerce. And what is really that market opportunity that you guys currently see?
Right. So starting from more broadly, we do believe like in the next 5 to 10 years, for a brand to be successful, they need to actually be a brand. They need to be differentiated on a sort of an experience and on a connection with customers. Because if they're relying on just a product that's commoditized, then that's going to really go away. That's going to be taken by Amazon. So for brands to even be successful, they need to find ways to really win the hearts and minds of customers and provide something that feels like a closer relationship than what they would get with Amazon. And chat is a very natural way to do that. It's already how we talk to our friends and family. So we want to basically ensure that businesses can can work with people in that way. And there's lots of scenarios that can get covered. So if you think more broadly, it's things like the entire like life cycle of a customer, from being aware of a brand to considering a product to then making a transaction and then translating into like longer term loyalty or customer support. All of those things can be augmented with a conversational interface. So there's definitely lots of ideas for in the long term what can happen. It should really feel like every person has their own personal shopping concierge for every brand out there. And it's going to be a combination of guided flows, of chatting and NLP, and also interaction with the camera, things like augmented reality and being able to furnish your house through a camera before you actually buy anything. And so that's all what's going to be happening over the next 5 to 10 years. What we're finding right now is we have a very specific way that chat is really driving sales, and it's really augmenting the existing customer journey. So for e-commerce, customers are already browsing websites, they're already using apps, they're already seeing ads, they're seeing Instagram and social presences. And Messenger can serve as really that companion to the customer journey that's already happening elsewhere. So that's why the very first scenario that we saw work was this abandoned cart scenario, where after a brand already acquires a customer and gets them to come to their site, there's a lot of reasons why that customer could not finish their purchase. Sometimes they forget, sometimes the price might not be right, sometimes they have some questions that is just not answered from the few seconds that they're on the site. So just like in the real world where you can have a person say, hey, can I help you with anything? Or did you still want this product? Then we found that to be a very useful use case in Messenger. And it was useful for customers. Customers engage with it at kind of record rates, especially when you consider comparing it to other channels. But also it drove significant revenue for businesses. And that opened our eyes to the possibility. So if we started off with the abandoned cart, there's a lot of other messages that make sense along the customer journey. So you can welcome users to the brand. You can not only show them the abandoned cart, but you can also use that as a springboard for a conversation. Maybe customers want to know about the shipping policy or returns, or they want to see reviews, or maybe they like that product, but maybe there's other products that are better fits. So how do we show related items in that conversational interface? And then as you go to people actually finishing the purchase, then you can give a receipt, shipping information, which is really valuable for users. It's a delightful experience. And then follow it up with asking them to leave a review or even join the referral program where they can share with their friends. So that's really the use case that we've been focused on building and enabling for brands, that companion experience to the existing shopping experience they've created. That said, I'm really excited for the future where I believe you're going to see e-commerce brands that exist solely as a chat interface. And we're seeing some examples of them coming out. And I'm really excited for when that happens, because that's gonna be revolutionary. And there's going to be brands that do over $1 billion in sales that it's going to come straight from a chat experience.
Definitely. No, I think that's a very pragmatic approach, right? It's, I think you and I both sort of see where the future is going, and certainly, it's not just conversational, right? At least in my opinion, right? I think there's going to be a variety of different touch points, contingent upon that specific customer journey. And I think conversational interfaces certainly provides an avenue of interaction that is just not attainable on other mediums today. That being said, I think you make a really good point about, e-commerce companies having to differentiate, having to be more experiential, and I think that's a really interesting point that I haven't heard too many other people point out, but it seems so true, because it seems as though, like, you're right, Amazon is coming and they're sweeping up all these different areas where maybe there's not as much differentiation. So for brands in 2019, in addition to, distinguishing themselves from the pack of all the other e-commerce companies, why else should they be getting into conversations this year?
Well, really, this is where customers already are. You have over 1.4 billion people on Messenger, even more on WhatsApp. So, any marketer will say that your marketing strategy is only as good as your ability to reach your customers where they actually are. So that's really the first reason why they should get on the platform, because if they want to even just have an experience reaching their customers. I would say number two is there are certain proven use cases that have just been working for many other brands. Like we have thousands of brands that they're making anywhere from $50 to $300 for every $1 they're spending on Messenger. So chat is already a revenue channel for these customers, and they can already point to line items like in their sources of where they're getting the revenue, and Messenger's already there. So that's why brands should start. And also, the last reason why brands should start is because this is similar to building a presence on Instagram or even Facebook in the early days. If you recall, in the early days, like 10 years ago, if you told businesses that, hey, they need to be on Facebook, business were incredulous. They were trying to understand why they should be in a place. It felt awkward being somewhere where people were just there to talk to their friends and family. And so, but sure enough, the businesses that were able to build an authentic presence there, they did really well. We've seen brands that now are doing billions of dollars in sales, but are really Instagram brands, and we're going to see the same thing with Messenger. And so, brands building that presence right now can have such a huge payoff over the coming years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Would you say like the trend is sort of around customer centricity? It's almost like we're meeting them more so on their terms, it seems like, with Instagram or Facebook Messenger, versus, more traditional sense of, someone coming to, a website and, punching keywords in. Would you say that is sort of a prevailing trend that you're seeing, or?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think it's definitely part of it that you have to be where your customers are, and there's just so many different touch points. But it's not just going to where your customers are. It's also just being available where they happen to be. So it's not just reaching them where they are, but also just being able to allow your customers to get very quick support, or get some questions answered, or see their receipt. And because currently most customers get that experience from email, and email open rates continue to fall year after year. It's getting harder for brands to actually reach customers there, and your email is just perceived as just this big dumping ground for brands, where you basically have to anyway search to find something. So if Messenger is where people are hanging out with their friends and family, then it's a natural place for them to even come to you.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I guess you would say that, in addition to the messaging channel, being a great place to engage people where they're already at, from like an e-commerce standpoint, personalization is also huge. So like, what sort of personalization can brands really take advantage of, on Facebook Messenger, provided, maybe an analog like, email and email marketing, and, how we saw sort of email automation sort of take place. Like, what sort of personalization can we get on these platforms that we couldn't really get in other places?
Yeah, it's a good question. So so I would first of all say that there is a baseline of personalization that's already possible in the email world. And then we should think about what's special, what's unique about a conversational channel. So already just with the customer browsing a website and just spending less than a minute on the site, maybe they browse a few products, maybe they add something to their cart. You already know so much about that customer. You know if they're shopping for men's clothes or female clothes. You know what their size is. You know generally what their style is. You know if they're looking for something that's very functional or something that's very fun or elegant or classy. You can also, because location's so much a part of people's shopping experience, you can know if it's hot or cold where they live. And this is just after 1 minute of the user interacting with the brand. And so right away, you have to really there's an onus on the chat experience to whether you're reaching out to the customer via email or chat. You want to make sure that experience feels as personalized as you can make it. So not only showing the products that they browse, but also showing other related items and using that information to dictate what is the future message that you're going to send. So I would say in the beginning is just getting to parity with what you're already seeing happening in the email world. And then I'll take one step further, which is if the unique value of chat is that you can have conversations be both personalized and engaging. So instead of just showing a set of personalized items, you can allow customers to see more or take lightweight quizzes or get some questions answered. And it's that kind of engagement through guided flows, which will allow, that's what allows the chat interface to be even more powerful than the email, than the email counterpart.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, right? It's like that, availability of that bi-directional communication channel that's ephemeral that your users are already on, and then secondly the targeting and personalization capabilities that are just sort of like this step up above of like what maybe people are already familiar with email automation and email marketing. So sort of moving past that, I know you touched on a couple of different use cases along the customer journey that ShopMessage supports, but for, let's say, a brand sort of entering into this space, into Facebook Messenger as a marketing tactic and in developing a conversational strategy around that, what are some like easy wins that you're seeing in the e-commerce space that brands can sort of jump on and start taking advantage of today?
So the easiest wins so if I was a brand trying to get onto Messenger, or if I was advising a brand that's trying to get onto a chat channel, I would really say, do these few things in order. So number one, first of all, just give customers a way to start that conversation with you. So that's something that we at ShopMessage think about a lot. You've already seen email pop-ups and things asking you to type in their email or SMS. But with messaging platforms, it makes things a lot easier. So for example, some of the things that we've built are you can detect that a user is logged into Facebook. You can make sure that they're in the right point in their customer journey where you can prompt them. So for example, we work with American Eagle Outfitters and used a customer chat plugin on their site to, when we identify that the user is shopping for a pair of jeans, we can pop up something that says, hey, can we help you? Can we help you find the right pair of jeans for you? And then really invite the user to answer a few questions to then get a set of personalized product recommendations. So really the beginning is being thoughtful about when do you want to start that conversation with customers. Sometimes it's when they're browsing products. Other times it's when they've already expressed interest. They've already added a product to their cart. That's actually a great time to offer a chance to chat with the customer service team or chat with the bot to get some of their questions answered, or even better, maybe offer some sort of a coupon if they even are willing to open the conversation. We find that actually increases their conversion rate, and then also gives a longer term channel to stay top of mind for that customer. So number one is really think about how you're getting opt-ins, how you're really growing the number of users on your channel. And then number two is think about how you can actually make the customer experience better along their entire journey. So I touched on this earlier. So things like welcoming them to the brand, giving them a sense of like personalized content based on what they browsed and what's in their cart. And then whenever they actually finish their purchase, celebrating that in a way that our friend would, and use kind of informal language, use some of the templates that have been that we provide, but have also been proven to work across hundreds of different brands. And so that's really the first two things that you should do. And then I would say the next thing to do is think about how do you create more of an immersive messenger experience. And that's where you think about, okay, like from a customer perspective, what are they most thinking about? And I'll give an example. So we already talked about the example of searching for a pair of jeans and making sure you get something that fits right on the ankle and the waist and is low rise versus a high rise jeans. But there's other cases where a brand has such a strong like social media presence. Like one example that we work with is Movement watches. They spend so much time and money on making sure their content is beautiful. It looks very uniform. It's bold. It's classy. It's modern. It's minimal. And customers, they recognize it when they see it. But they can know they want to be part of this movement lifestyle, but not know what product that they should buy. So that's a great time to start that conversation and allow customers to really go beyond just liking the brand and being aware of it, but actually finding a product that works for them. And maybe letting them know that, okay, maybe they know that Movement sells watches, but maybe they didn't know that they also sell sunglasses or blue light blocking glasses or jewelry for women. So that's a great time to introduce that in more of an interactive conversational interface. And then lastly is from a customer service perspective, trying to be thoughtful about what customers are going through. So some of our best experiences that we've been able to build have actually been working with the customer service teams within these brands. They know right away the top 3 to 5 questions that customers are asking. So just giving easy ways to respond to those questions. NLP works for those, but sometimes even better is just showing that, like, just having a persistent menu that where you can get support and these 3 to 5 common questions are listed. And then finally is making sure that when the bot experience isn't doesn't provide everything that the customer needs, how do you provide a very clean way for the user to actually go talk to a human? And making sure that's very well understood to the user that now they're going through a different flow and that they're going to talk to a person. And also from the perspective of the customer success team for the merchant, knowing that when someone's coming to you, that you can see some context on what they're actually doing, what they've browsed, what their purchase history is. So if you put all those together, that's kind of a place to start. I mentioned a lot of things, but it really comes down to just starting the conversation, giving some meaningful points of value in that conversation, offering customer support, and lastly is a way to talk to a customer, talk to a customer success agent.
Cool. Yeah. So we've sort of covered why it's sort of imperative to be on this channel on Facebook Messenger. And you just covered, sort of how to sort of craft that conversational strategy or how at least to begin to think about what are like the important components to include as you sort of build that. So now, I'm definitely curious if you don't mind sharing some successes, some brand successes. I know you touched on American Eagle Outfitters. Curious to learn a bit more on like what sort of business outcomes are your brands sort of seeing that you guys are working with?
Yeah, so the brands that we're seeing are first of all, they're actually driving real revenue. And so if you look at where the revenue is coming from, some of our brands are getting anywhere from 5 to 10% of their overall sales through a messenger conversation. So that means somebody actually received a message and engaged with it. So that's first of all very powerful that they're just getting they're driving meaningful revenue. But if you look at what actually is happening upstream that leads to that higher revenue, you can look at the entire funnel. So open rates we're seeing 80% plus open rates for abandoned cart message. And these are like 5 times what you would see in the email world. And then it's not just that people are opening the messages, they're also engaging with them at a higher rate. So brands like for Blenders Eyewear, they're seeing a 33% click-through rate on their messages. So these people are actually not only getting the messages, but they're using it to navigate back to the site to either browse some more or finish a purchase. And then what we've also seen is, depending on the brand, there are many brands that are actually driving average order value as well. because there's more trust associated with the brand if you can message them. Oftentimes you can remind them of other products that they should add to cart. So really, we've seen that at every step of the funnel, Messenger can be stronger than what we see in the email world.
Definitely, absolutely. I've seen several case studies online, specifically around Facebook Messenger. It seems to be, like this like takeoff channel, especially for marketers or e-commerce store owners or like, and I think it's just a really compelling channel, even if, to your point, there's not a heavy use of what we call natural language processing, which is sort of the AI component to answer questions or inquiries by end users. But instead we have sort of a more, I guess I would say like decision tree experience. Even with that experience on Facebook Messenger, there are still significant business outcomes that are being driven, and I think for brands to really be able to understand that it doesn't have to be the most, complex AI natural language processing implementation, it could simply be, a very compelling experience on Facebook Messenger that's rule-based and button-driven, right?
Right. And I would say, that was very deliberate on our part.
Yeah.
If you think about like the hype cycle of chatbots, which way better than I do, that there's many companies that back in 2016 or so, 2015, 2016, raised a lot of money around building a chatbot that really felt like a human, that responded as if it was a human. And that's still, I would say that's still the goal. There's a lot that, you could see that as the NLP platforms improve, and from a product perspective, there's better ways to help brands even structure these conversations and respond in a meaningful way. That's going to happen, but it's just not there right now. And customers know that, and in fact, they've been frustrated by it. There's so many times when you try to talk to a Google Home or Siri or Alexa, and you believe you're asking a pretty simple question, but you get a response that doesn't make any sense. And oftentimes people just feel dejected afterwards. They're like, okay, well, this doesn't work. And it's strange that oftentimes there's a game just trying to figure out what the NLP will actually respond to. Like, that's kind of a great discovery if you start asking a bunch of questions and finally understands what you're saying. But for the most part, it's answering a question that's not quite what you're saying. So, what we found is actually there's times when having a guided flow is actually just a better experience, especially when it's a very, very structured use case, like e-commerce, like someone's trying to buy something, or like there's a lead gen scenario where you're actually just trying to fill out a form, or you're trying to make a booking, or you're trying to pay someone. So these are cases where you don't necessarily need to type, but actually just being able to tap a button is just a better experience. You can kind of think about it as, this is the kind of experience you would have in a full-on native app, but now you can have that experience with every brand that you want to talk to without needing to download a separate app.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comparison. We saw sort of the app generation, and from what I understand, a lot of the enterprise deployments of mobile applications just really did not drive a net positive for a lot of these enterprises. And now looking at something like Facebook Messenger and chatbots, you could deploy something in pretty much like half the time, much more cost effectively. So I think there's a real, just from like a comparative nature from a financial standpoint between mobile application development versus conversational interface on Facebook Messenger, you're right. I think, you could have a very similar experience on a channel that, you already have customers that are sitting there, they're waiting to be addressed. So I think that's a really good point. That being said, what sort of challenges do you currently see within this ecosystem? It could be specific to Facebook Messenger. It could just be specific to conversational interfaces in general, because, I personally think, with every emergent technology, it's not only, sort of understanding, how exciting the technology is and the practical use cases, but also understanding what are the limitations so we can sort of operate amongst those and still provide compelling experiences.
Yeah, well, I'd still say it's very early right now. I mean, so part of the limitation is actually just people's expectations. So consumers' expectations of what happens when you start chatting with the bot it's not clear yet, because probably a very small percentage of the brands you're talking to will even respond. So most brands, if you just start typing in Facebook Messenger, you'll get nothing back. And maybe that's because a brand perceives this as the same SLA as an email, and they'll get back to you in 4 to 24 hours. So the expectations are still not fully developed from a customer perspective, and even from a business perspective. Merchants right now aren't clear about how they should be thinking about chat and Messenger. Some people think about it as a replacement for email. They're like, okay, I can just take all of my email marketing and put into this channel, and now I can just benefit from these high open rates and click-through rates. And that worked to an extent, but it's very important, or Facebook finds it very important that they protect this channel. And so there's lots of rules on how you can actually engage with customers, when you can do that. And Messenger is, amongst the Facebook platforms, the most lax. It gives the brands the most abilities to proactively message a customer. You can't even really do that on WhatsApp or Instagram. So businesses need to change their expectation. It's not just another channel where you can blast people. Or if you do want to do that, then there's going to be a paid component. Also, there are some limitations. I would say right now, for certain use cases, a website is actually just better. So for e-commerce brands, they've already invested in websites, and even on their mobile site. And now the customers have been on enough mobile sites that they know how to navigate it. They know that there's going to be a hamburger menu where they can browse collections. They know that they can scroll up and down and see a grid of products. They understand the concept of a product landing page where they see a description, the ability to choose their options and buy their product. They know what a checkout flow looks like. So these are things that already exist, and in some cases are better. Especially, it could be better in actually just showing a visual demonstration of what your brand is. So in certain cases for prospecting, for example, it's better to send users to your website as opposed to just starting a Messenger conversation. So I would say that's a current limitation. And then there's still some technology limitation around NLP, where, and I mentioned this before, it's where it's not quite there yet to provide just like to provide experience that doesn't require any human down the line. So that's what we're currently seeing as the limitations. I think like some of the stuff I'm really excited about is the use of the camera a lot more. So being able to try on products and using your camera and make purchasing decisions that way. I think this, once you start adding more experiences, that's going to be where chat and Messenger differentiates itself. So I'm excited for what that is. I currently don't know what those are, and I'm excited to be part of building that and working with brands who are thought leaders, and oftentimes they have better ideas than even we as platform builders do. So those are things that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I think this is actually a really good segue to maybe also transition to talk about best practices that you've seen, because I think you probably mentioned one of them. Brands need to think about SLAs differently. Whereas maybe with email they're saying 24 hours is acceptable, but that's just simply not the case on a messaging channel as ephemeral as Facebook Messenger. So if you don't mind maybe elaborating on a couple other best practices that you sort of have seen as you guys have gone down this journey with ShopMessage, I think would really be beneficial to the audience.
Right. So some of the best we've seen a few best practices. One best practice is just being very clear to customers about why they're getting a message and what they can do with that. So giving customers easy ways to manage their subscription, whether it's like unsubscribing or changing some of their options. That's something that's really important as a best practice. Another best practice is making sure that the messages themselves they fit the conversational channel, they fit chat. So we see some brands start to write whole paragraphs like they were addressing an email. It'll say like, "Dear so-and-so," skip a couple lines, and then in the end sign it from a person. And that doesn't make sense. It would be awkward if you talk to your friends that way. Yes. So actually taking more of a conversational tone Other best practices are not just taking a conversational tone, but trying to extend, trying to actually like incorporate the brand voice in there. So there's a lot of brands that, they use emojis very heavily, and it just fits what they would do on Instagram anyways. So being able to extend that into Messenger matters a lot. Or if they have a certain humorous tone, making sure that extends as well. And then lastly, I would say is giving customers a sense for what they can do inside of the bot experience. So making sure that every message that gets sent has a call to action for what you can do next. Even if it's as easy as just like thanks or show me more. I think that matters a lot. And then actually utilizing the persistent menu, which is currently a feature of Messenger, but I expect is going to be something that gets rolled out to the other platforms as well. One of the interesting things we found is that for the brands that are sending messages to their customers along their life cycle, yes, those messages are really important. So like an abandoned cart message or a promotional message are important. But what we find is actually just as much revenue, and sometimes more revenue, gets driven by the customer seeing that message, but then deciding to navigate through the persistent menu to buy something completely different. So, that is something that is really important in just making sure your bot clearly demonstrates what it can do and giving your customers a way to access it.
Absolutely. So it sort of sounds that, there are a number of best practices that I think, seem simple and straightforward, but I think have huge impact that I think, if people just applied some of them, they start to see some more significant engagement and business outcomes for their brand. I think all those are incredibly practical. So I guess the other thing, that I was curious about is, you'd mentioned it previously, how Mark Zuckerberg is, his vision of Facebook is really converging around messaging, right? And I'm sure you saw the announcement where they're saying that we're going to take Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and create this unified communication channel. So it seems to me that there's even a greater importance for brands to start getting onto this platform. But what do you sort of foresee, Facebook sort of going with that? Like, what's your like sort of ideal vision of how that sort of ends up benefiting e-commerce?
Yeah, it's hard to know right now. And I obviously haven't talked to Mark Zuckerberg about this. And I think a lot of this is still yet to be completely confirmed from Facebook. I believe, they have to think through some really tough product questions right now. And this is a question that they have to solve. Like how is it going to benefit e-commerce? They have to talk about how is this going to actually benefit users? So, a lot of people currently, they like the fact that the people on WhatsApp are different from the ones they talk to on Instagram or different from the ones they talk to on Messenger. So Facebook's going to have to think about that problem. Also, they have to think about encryption. One of the big, one major impetus for Mark Zuckerberg even making that announcement is that there's a growing expectation that people's conversations with each other are going to be encrypted and that there's privacy just built in across all the app experiences. So I don't know for sure. If I had to speculate, I would guess that the encryption is the end-to-end encryption is going to be eventually rolled out to all of the apps when people are talking to their friends and family. But it's an open question on whether that encryption will also apply to businesses, because oftentimes, for businesses, they need to incorporate third-party apps, or there are other reasons for which the information that's shared might need to be used in a broader context. So these are tough questions that have to be figured out. I would say if this happens in the right way, there's really a vision of a unified messaging, which is if I want to get in touch with a person, I just have to get in touch with that person. I don't have to think about what app they're using. I just get in touch with them, and then the system just knows what's the right way to reach them. So I think that is really that's going to be really important. I think that's going to be important for brands as well. Not for brands to proactively reach out to customers, but for customers to be able to find their brands on any platform. I think if we take an example of what happened when Facebook first bought Instagram, if you recall, Instagram did not first just start offering its own ad system right away. Facebook took a very deliberate effort to make sure that the way you would buy ads on Facebook is also the same way that you would buy ads in Instagram. It's just a matter of choosing some placements. And maybe that took a little bit longer than if they would have just built it separately for Instagram, but at least they have a unified experience for businesses. So I think that's going to happen as well. You can imagine if a business were to want to get onto chat in the next few years, they don't have to think about, okay, am I on Messenger or Instagram or WhatsApp? It's just I'm on chat, and customers can and I can just define what the experience should be, and it'll just do the right thing on whatever other channel that is. So I think if those parts of the user experience are really, Facebook gets them right, then the e-commerce scenarios are just going to grow as a result. So,
definitely. I think that's certainly exciting, especially, I know you pointed out before, sort of looking towards the Asian markets when we think about messaging, because on WeChat, I know that $60,000 cars have been sold. And it seems to me that, in the West or just in European markets, we're beginning to see maybe that climb towards social media centric messaging platforms as we sort of begin to get closer and closer to, maybe what we saw in China or Japan or Korea. So I think it's a really exciting prospect. Similar to that, I also just want to get your perspective on, like, what do you think about voice right now? Like, what's your opinion on it? As far as like commercial applications or even e-commerce, conversational commerce, like, what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, voice is going to be very powerful. It's already having more of a presence in people's lives, and just seeing some of the data from what Amazon would share. And it does seem like for certain use cases, especially repurchasing scenarios, voice makes a lot of sense, and it's a very easy experience. So I do think that voice is going to be a great way to engage with brands. But it is early to tell. What I think is going to be more powerful is maybe starting a conversation through a voice, and then having some sort of a companion where you can see more of a visual display, whether that's built into the like your system itself, like what Amazon's doing with their new Alexa devices, or maybe it really does function like a companion app where you're speaking to your Google Home, and then you're actually seeing a list of results, like Google Shopping results, that you can see visually on your phone, and you can choose from there. So as an entry point, I think voice is very strong. I worry about the ability to kind of maintain context in a conversation, and I think that's a tough problem. And it's a tough problem right now to do it on Rails. So that means it's even tougher for an e-commerce business that doesn't have an expertise around voice to start to build that now. I don't know. I'd be really excited to. I'm trying to think about, like, what would the first voice first or voice only shopping experience look like. And I can't picture it at the moment, but I'm pretty sure a few years from now we'll look back and it'll seem obvious.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. It seems to me that, especially in e-commerce, right, there's like an objective you're trying to lead customers to, right? Provided you engage with them initially and you're nurturing them, and, hopefully it comes to some sort of conclusion where they purchase something, it's, the successive steps you're trying to walk them down. And it seems to me that, trying to manage context with natural language processing would be difficult, because it's like, if they get off at one point in that sales sequence per se, your natural language processing and the context it's supposed to hold will need to be able to address that unique, concern a customer may have, or a question, right? So
Right.
I certainly think we're not at that stage yet, but you're right. Like, maybe a couple of years from now, it might be a different story. And it's a very interesting world from a consumer standpoint. It's almost like, it's magic, right? You can just, interact with the environment in the manner you choose, and, things will sort of activate based upon how you want to drive that interaction. So
Yeah, I look forward to that. Like,
yeah.
I would look forward to even like customer support scenarios, saying like, hey, I got my pair of Allbirds, and can I replace this and get it in a bigger size or in a different color? I mean, it'd be great to be able to do that for brands I work with. Or, if you're running low on a sort of consumable good like a nutritional supplement or some cosmetics, you can just ask to start a subscription. So I think those scenarios are going to be really fun and powerful and going to drive the lifetime value of a customer, and don't necessarily have to be like pure from scratch, starting a purchase experience.
Yeah, totally. So at this point, I sort of want to give you the stage. If there's any announcements for ShopMessage or where people can go to learn more, or maybe where they can find you speaking at upcoming events, the stage is yours.
Thanks. So yeah, I would say the main thing is if you're interested, if you're a brand, if you're a merchant, and you're looking to really start in conversational commerce and you're looking to bring on chat as a revenue channel, just come talk to us. You can find us at shopmessage.me, shopmessage.me. And we'd love to help you, and we'd love to build out a case study and really show you what our platform has to offer.
Cool, man. So before I let you go, I always ask our guests this question. I think, going into new technology where things aren't always certain, best practices don't always exist. And, it's sometimes ambiguous, what are the things we're getting into? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired? What keeps you, gets you out of bed in the morning to continue to pursue this sort of endeavor?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's not always easy, and because we don't know the answers on a day-to-day basis. I think what keeps me going is actually the scale of what's possible. I mean, it's definitely true that I believe very firmly that in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be e-commerce channels. And so just seeing the shift happen right before our eyes, and just having the opportunity to be a part of it, and that to me is that's very inspiring. This is going to be we're going to be looking back sometime and wonder how we could have even made purchases or had relationships with brands that was not chat based. So just being a part of this experience so that you can make end customers experience better, you can actually give new brands the ability to create a chat experience, even though they would have to know nothing about engineering. Like that to me is really inspiring. So I hope to keep doing that. And even more than that, kind of more personally, we have just a phenomenal team at ShopMessage. And actually on most days, that's actually what keeps me going. We really enjoyed working together to build for our customers and definitionally creating something that didn't exist before. So that's always, creating is fun. It's this is like art. So we want to continue to do that. We want the company to do well so that we can not only be a part of this bigger trend, but also just make sure that all of us on the team are feeling like we're making progress, like we're building something that's larger than us individually. So if we can do that, and really make our team successful, then that's really what keeps me motivated.
Cool, man. I love it. Well, Arjun, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast, talking about e-commerce, talking about the journey, talking about best practices. Really appreciate it. We'll definitely have you come back on again once you guys have some new features you guys are looking to release. Appreciate having you on.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much, Chad.
Cool. Take it easy.
Thanks. Bye.